to another dimension, surpassing the vastness of time and space. The Grand Thaumaturgist is here.
Alright, cheeky chops. In a previous video, I took a quick butcher's at where to start with world building, so check that out if you haven't already. But I fancied delving deeper into each of my main methods of world creation. In this video, I'll be exploring further my use of top-down world building. When creating settings for my role-playing campaigns, I tend to use this method together with the bottom-up approach, which I'll explore in another video. So be sure to subscribe and hit the old bell to get notified when I upload that. Ultimately, I feel there are plenty of ways to approach world building, and they each benefit the others. But let's have a closer gander at starting big with top down. I tend to use this approach when considering the bigger picture or the setting of the campaign itself. It lets me consider how these things can shape the adventures and encounters of the player characters as they experience the campaign. With top-down creation, there isn't really a limit on how big or broad it can start. It could begin with an interesting idea which causes friction between neighbouring nations or cultures, or maybe fantastical geology for the continent the campaign is set upon. I sometimes like to use it to create the very worlds themselves for some of my campaigns, which I gave an example of in my previous video. What is the very world itself like? Is it or was it a spherical globe? Or is it a more fantastical world, like your excellent Terry Pratchett's Discworld, which is similar to the world turtle from your Hindu mythology? I've also found the top-down approach very useful if the world I'm creating is going to have a deep history and lore. Or perhaps it's planned to be the setting of many campaigns, each one exploring a different aspect of its surface. Perhaps the world is being planned to host multiple groups in different areas. Game masters or storytellers may well have a world in mind for their campaign. Other game masters and storytellers, myself included, may fancy a more random approach at times, especially in interstellar or galactic spanning campaigns. The more random nature of some tables and charts can often inspire a lot of thinking outside the box, which can only add a more unique nature to the campaign setting world, if that's what you're after. I've personally had a lot of fun rolling up random planets using the tables from your traveller system. I then get my creative tendrils working trying to figure out what might live on such a planet, if indeed anything can. But you never know, life finds a way. A useful part of top-down creation is to consider how global or larger events can help shape the campaign. Perhaps there is a war being fought between interstellar powers, or a star has gone supernova in your sci-fi campaign. Maybe there's been some catastrophic event on your campaign world, like a massive eruption or meteor strike. Maybe there's a sudden shift in climate, or an invasion is happening from another world or plane. Regardless how or why these events are happening, they certainly could affect the experience of your player characters. There could be food shortages, or things like famines, droughts and floods due to the events, or just because trade's dried up. This could lead to disease. Maybe every youth is being conscripted to fight a threat, or craftsmen are being shipped to the crisis area. All these things could affect a party of adventurers as they move from place to place at ground level and inspire the adventures they could take part in. Knowing what is happening more widely could then help players with their characters' backstories and could encourage player input on details if a more collaborative world-building process is something you'd like to explore. For instance, let's say that on the world that I'm creating, a massive earthquake has devastated a southern continent where, until that point, one of the dominant cultures were to be found. They traded far and wide, were leaders in invention and science, and their great armies kept order and a terrible foe at bay. As a result of that massive earthquake, the empire near crumbles under the strain of the devastation it caused, and in their weakened state are being washed away under the tide of that terrible foe I mentioned. The fall of such an important culture will certainly bring vast and deeply felt change to the world about them, and players could be inspired by the ramifications caused when it comes to creating their characters' backstories. Perhaps one character seeks adventure to support his village, who are now cut off from supplies. Maybe another seeks new lands to escape the foul armies sweeping in unchecked. Another may want revenge on those same armies for what they did to their folk. And perhaps another lost everything in the devastation, but is determined to win back her riches. It's also worth considering from a top-down perspective the availability of resources and how that may impact the cultures you create. What kind of technological period does the world sit within, or even have the inhabitants of that world skipped a technological level or found new ways of utilizing technology? Magic is often an interesting thing to consider from a top-down approach, as if it is highly accessible, it could potentially have huge ramifications of not only the societal systems of the world, but also the world itself. Perhaps there was a great war of mages at some point in the history of the world, and the devastation of such a conflict can still be seen. What were the ramifications of that war? How do the common folk view spellcasters? What is the prevention in it happening again? Or is it something that is always in the back of people's minds, and they fear another war of mages and look upon those who utilize magic with great suspicion and fear? By considering the governance of nations in the top-down approach, it allows the creator to consider what ramifications and effects that governing body may have on its populace. A particularly oppressive ruling system can have catastrophic effects for the population under it, where citizens could be barely more than slaves or serfs, and the very powerful are wicked and affluent in their wealth. But there are countless governing systems to consider, and some, I'm sure, are awaiting to be considered or invented in your neck of the woods. But by considering the conditions of each rule, it can open up the considerations of what it would be like for those underneath that rulership, those that player characters and parties are bound to interact with. A deeply oppressed society may fear strangers as bringing unwanted attention upon them, or perhaps they consider them as potential liberators and will do all they can to garner the stranger's favour, in the hope that they may seek to free the citizens from their subjugation. By building a world based on a top-down approach, it allows more access to introduce strange travellers from faraway lands, as well as snippets of lore and history for a group of intrepid, inquisitive adventurers. As by starting big, areas far outside the range of a group of player characters may well be explored by a creator. With hints of these lands and introductions of items or people from these exotic places, it can only help to add flavour and realism to what will appear to be a much larger and more vibrant world. So, I hope you've enjoyed this exploration into the top-down world-building process. Please do subscribe to help support this humble channel, and you're always welcome to leave a cheeky little like too. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to catch you in the next video. Ta-ta for now.